What's up, you glorious bastards? Welcome back to another deep dive. You ready to dissect this glorious clusterfuck of 80s cheese known as Spies Like Us? We got articles, trivia, behind-the-scenes crap. Should be fun.
Yeah, absolutely, man. On the surface, it looks like pure cheese, but there's some weird depth to it.
All right, so first things first. For those who haven't seen this cinematic masterpiece, let's set the stage. Two incompetent dipshits, Austin Milbarge and Emmett Fitzhume.
Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase, man, at their comedic peak, right?
Yeah, pure comedic genius.
Their chemistry is undeniable.
Oh, yeah.
It's that classic dynamic, the bumbling fool and the arrogant schemer, almost like a throwback to those Road to movies with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby.
Totally.
And speaking of which, Bob Hope even makes a cameo.
Oh, yeah, he does.
Brilliant. Adds another layer of absurdity to the whole thing.
Like a little nod to those classic comedies.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's get back to our dynamic duo. They end up as decoy spies for the DIA. Classic bait and switch that sends them on a collision course with a Soviet ICBM and a whole lot of trouble.
And the real kicker is the whole mission is a setup to test an American anti-ballistic missile system. They're basically pawns in this game of nuclear chicken, and they don't even know it.
Talk about being thrown into the deep end. But that's what makes it so damn funny, man. It's like watching two clueless puppies wander into a minefield.
You know it's going to be a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
But you can't look away.
You can't. Then you've got this incredible cast of cameos. It just adds to this chaotic brilliance of it all. Terry Gilliam, Sam Raimi, Costa Gavras, even Joel Coen pops up for a hot second.
Yeah, it's like a who's who of Hollywood.
It really is.
Like Landis just raided a film school and said, all right, you're all in my movie now. Go make some magic.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget Frank Oz, Yoda himself, directing a scene in this madness.
Oh, yeah. And Ray Harryhausen, the stop-motion legend.
Oh, yeah. You can't forget about Ray. It's like, what the fuck were they thinking?
Oh, right. And it's not just directors. You got B.B. King strums a few chords, and even Edwin Newman, that stone-faced news anchor, pops up.
I mean, you gotta wonder what the atmosphere was like on that set.
Probably pure cocaine-fueled chaos and bewildered amusement, knowing Landis.
Yeah, most likely. But amidst all this madness, there's actually a pretty banging theme song.
Spies Like Us by Sir Paul McCartney himself. Hit number 7 in the U.S., number 13 in the U.K.
Not bad. Not bad at all.
Not bad.
Can you believe Landis actually hated that song?
I already thought it was shit.
The man who directed Thriller.
Yeah. But you don't say no to a Beatle, especially when Warner Bros. Is breathing down your neck.
I guess not. And speaking of music, we can't forget Elmer Bernstein's score. Perfect blend of spy thriller tension and comedic whimsy. It's what elevates the film beyond just slapstick.
It does. It's like the glue that holds this whole crazy contraption together.
Right. But okay, let's get back to the plot, because things take a pretty dark turn. You know, the generals orchestrating this whole charade decide to keep the government in the dark about the ICBM launch. Yeah. They're willing to risk nuclear war just to test their fancy new missile defense system.
Like they took Dr. Strangelove, injected him with pure 80s hubris.
Yeah. These guys really thought they could just launch a nuke and everything would be hunky-dory.
It's brilliant. It's a satire of Cold War paranoia and the military-industrial complex. Their willingness to play fast and loose with the fate of the world, it's like, adds this whole other layer to what could have been a just purely silly film. And the crazy thing is, audiences ate it up. The film made bank. 77 million worldwide against a 22 million budget.
So not only did they potentially risk nuclear annihilation, but they made a shit ton of money doing it. Talking about a win-win, right?
Right.
Well, maybe not for the critic.
Yeah, they were a bit more divided. Some found it hilarious. A perfect blend of slapstick and satire. Others just didn't get it. Criticized it for being unfunny, lacking in character development. But honestly, who goes to a John Landis film for deep character studies?
Exactly. This movie is about pure entertainment, man.
Yeah.
A roller coaster ride through Cold War anxieties with a healthy dose of big jokes and explosions.
Yeah, there's a certain charm to its absurdity, a willingness to push boundaries, embrace the ridiculous, and that's what makes it such a fun watch, even all these years later.
Okay, now we got to talk about that scene in the missile silo. You know, the one with the Russian crew?
Ah, yes. The pre-apocalyptic hookup scene. One of the more controversial moments.
These guys think they started World War III, and their first instinct is to get laid. What the hell was Landis thinking?
It's definitely a scene that hasn't aged well. Some see it as a tasteless joke. Others, the commentary on the absurdity of war, are primal instincts in the face of annihilation. Either way, it's a moment that makes you go, wait, what the fuck just happened?
It really does. That's Landis for you, always pushing the envelope, even if it means crossing a few lines. But hey, at least our heroes managed to avert disaster and even become buddies with the Russian crew.
Yeah. It's surprisingly heartwarming, ending for a film that's full of ridiculous twists and turns. And it speaks to this deeper message about the futility of war and the potential for human connection, even across ideological divides.
So we've got bumbling spies, celebrity cameos, a killer theme song, Cold War paranoia, and a near-nuclear apocalypse, all wrapped up in a package of pure 80s excess.
It's a unique blend of elements that, despite its flaws, has cemented Spies Like Us as a cult classic.
Cult classic indeed. Now let's grab another beer and get into the cultural impact of this glorious mess. Stay with us, you magnificent bastards.
All right, back to the shit show we call Spies Like Us. What really strikes me is how this movie, despite being, a product of the 80s, still manages to resonate with audiences today. It's like this ridiculous time capsule of Cold War anxieties and comedic excess that somehow still tickles the funny bone.
You think it's just the nostalgia factor? Or is there something more to it? Like, are we all secretly yearning for a simpler time when the biggest threat to humanity was just a bunch of bumbling bureaucrats and a few misplaced nukes?
I think it's deeper than that. It's the underdog story, man. These two lovable screw-ups who stumble their way into saving the world, defying all odds, logic. It's a classic tale that never gets old. We all love to see the little guy win, even if he does it by accidentally launching a nuclear missile and seducing a Russian soldier.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the American dream on crack, fueled by pure incompetence and dumb luck.
But you're right, there's something inherently satisfying about watching these two idiots succeed despite themselves. Like, it gives us hope that maybe, just maybe, even we could accidentally save the world from annihilation one day.
And let's not forget the film's brilliant satire of Cold War paranoia. It simultaneously captures the very real fear of nuclear annihilation that people felt back then, while also lampooning the absurdity of it all. It's a delicate balance, and Landis nails it. Yeah, totally. It's like he's saying, hey, we're all going to die in a fiery nuclear holocaust, but at least we can laugh at the absurdity of it all while we're waiting for the bombs to drop.
Exactly. It's that gallows humor that makes it so relatable, even today. I mean, we're still living in a world where nuclear war is a very real threat, but we've learned to cope with that anxiety through laughter and a healthy dose of cynicism.
And speaking of cynicism, you got to give props to Landis for that pre-apocalyptic hookup scene. Talk about a bold move. It's like he's throwing a giant middle finger to the whole concept of nuclear war, saying, even in the face of annihilation, our primal urges will prevail.
It's definitely a scene that has sparked a lot of debate over the years. Is a tasteless joke, a commentary on human nature, or just Landis being Landis, pushing boundaries and challenging our sensibilities?
Who the hell knows? But it definitely gets people talking, which is more than you can say for most comedies these days.
And let's be real, it's not like the rest of the film is some kind of highbrow intellectual masterpiece. It's a silly, over-the-top action comedy that knows exactly what it is and doesn't pretend to be anything else. And that's part of its charm.
Exactly. It's like a sugar rush for your brain,
Oh,
of explosions, dick jokes, and enough cameos to make Quentin Tarantino blush.
But amidst all the chaos and absurdity, there are these moments of genuine heart and human connection. Think about the scene where Milbarge and Fitzhume are reflecting on their lives, believing they're about to die in a nuclear blast. There's this real sense of vulnerability and camaraderie between them. It's a reminder that even in the face of imminent destruction, we can still find solace in human connection.
Yeah, right. It's like saying, hey, even if the world is about to end, at least I've got this idiot by my side to share the last few laughs with.
And speaking of laughs, this movie is full of quotable lines. Doctor, doctor, we've got a sick friend, needs medicine. We're the two guys from the U.S. here to inspect the missile.
Yeah.
Pure comedic gold.
And who can forget that classic exchange at the end? What are we going to do now? We're going to Disneyland. It's the perfect encapsulation of the film's optimistic nihilism.
Like, hey, we just averted a nuclear apocalypse. Might as well celebrate with a trip to the happiest place on Earth. It's a brilliant way to end the film on a note of absurdist joy.
So we've got these bumbling spies, a shit ton of celebrity cameos, a killer theme song, a near-nuclear apocalypse, and enough quotable lines to fill a book. But what about its impact? Has this movie left any kind of lasting legacy, or is it just a relic of the 80s, destined to gather dust on a shelf next to a Betamax player and a Rubik's Cube?
Well, for one, it's been referenced and parodied countless times over the years, which is always a sign that something has permeated the cultural consciousness. Family Guy even did a whole episode paying homage to Spies Like Us, with Aykroyd and Chase reprising their roles.
And let's not forget the film's visual style, which is pure 80s excess. from the bold colors and over-the-top gadgets to those gloriously cheesy special effects.
It's a time capsule of a bygone era, but it's done with such a sense of fun and self-awareness that it becomes endearing. You can't help but smile at the sheer audacity of it all.
Right. It's like watching a neon-colored, shoulder-padded train wreck, and you can't look away. But there's one aspect of the film that hasn't aged so well: the portrayal of women.
Yeah, let's be honest, the female characters in Spies Like Us are basically props. They're either eye candy or damsels in distress, there to serve the needs of the male characters.
It's a classic case of boys will be boys, with a healthy dose of 80s sexism thrown in for good measure.
And while it's important to acknowledge the film's historical context, it's also important to call out its problematic elements. We can appreciate the film's humor and its satirical take on the Cold War, but we can also recognize that its portrayal of women is, to put it bluntly, fucked up.
Totally. It's a reminder that even our favorite films can be problematic, and that's okay. It's all part of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
But beyond the sexism and the near-nuclear war, is there a deeper message here? Like some kind of profound statement about the human condition?
Well, on the surface, it's a goofy comedy about two idiots who stumble their way into saving the world. But if you look a little deeper, I think there's a message about the futility of war and the importance of human connection.
You're saying that amidst all the dick jokes and explosions, Landis is actually trying to make a statement about peace and love. That's some deep shit, man.
Well, maybe not peace and love, but definitely about the absurdity of conflict and the potential for human connection, even across ideological divides. The ending, where Milbarge and Fitzhume end up playing a friendly game of Risk with the Russian crew, is a perfect example of that.
Right. It's like, hey, we almost blew each other to Kingdom Come, but now we're all buddies bonding over a board game about global domination. It's a heartwarmingly twisted message of hope, in a Spies Like Us kind of way.
It's a film that celebrates the triumph of human ingenuity and compassion over Cold War paranoia and military brinkmanship.
And it does so with a healthy dose of humor, explosions, and questionable sexual politics. What's not to love? But let's move on to something a bit more nuanced. What about the choice of actors? Was there something specific about Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase that made them the perfect duo for this kind of comedic mayhem?
Absolutely. Their comedic styles complement each other perfectly. Aykroyd brings that manic energy and physical comedy, while Chase is the master of deadpan snark and witty one-liners.
It's like watching a comedic supernova, with these two stars colliding and creating this explosion of pure, unadulterated hilarity. But let's be real, this movie isn't exactly a shining example of feminist cinema.
Yeah, the portrayal of women in Spies Like Us is definitely problematic. It's a product of its time, for sure, but that's no excuse. The female characters are mostly there to be eye candy or damsels in distress. They lack agency and depth, which is a shame considering the comedic talent of the actresses involved.
It's like the filmmakers were stuck in some kind of time warp where women were just accessories to the male characters' adventures. You've got the seductive scientist, the damsel in distress, the Russian soldier who's basically just a walking sex joke. It's a cringe fest of 80s sexism.
And it's not just the way the female characters are written, it's also the way they're framed and shot. There's a lot of gratuitous shots of their bodies, and the camera often lingers on them in a way that feels exploitative. It's a reminder that even in comedies, the male gaze is often the default perspective.
Right. It's like they're saying, hey, let's take a break from all the explosions and dick jokes to oogle some tits and ass.
Yeah.
It's a bummer, man. It makes it hard to fully enjoy the film knowing that it's perpetuating these harmful stereotypes.
But it's important to remember that even our favorite films can have problematic elements. It's all part of the conversation, right? We can appreciate the film's humor and its satirical take on the Cold War, but we can also recognize that its portrayal of women is, to put it bluntly, fucked up.
Totally. It's a reminder that even our favorite films can be problematic, and that's okay. It's all part of the conversation, right? We can appreciate the film's humor and its satirical take on the Cold War, but we can also recognize that its portrayal of women is, to put it bluntly, fucked up.
Exactly. It's about having a critical eye and being aware of the ways in which films reflect and reinforce societal norms, even when they're trying to be subversive.
So, Spies Like Us is a funny, action-packed, often absurd film that captures the zeitgeist of the 80s. It's got iconic characters, quotable lines, a killer theme song, and a surprisingly relevant message about the dangers of Cold War paranoia. But it's also a film that reflects the problematic gender dynamics of its time.
Yeah. It's a film that deserves to be both celebrated and critiqued. We can laugh at its ridiculousness, appreciate its clever satire, and acknowledge its flaws. It's a reminder that even the most entertaining films can be complex and contradictory, reflecting the messy realities of the world they were made in.
All right, you magnificent bastards. That's about all the time we have for this deep dive into Spies Like Us. We've laughed, we've cried, we've questioned the sanity of John Landis. What more could you ask for?
Hopefully you've learned a thing or two about the film, its historical context, and its lasting impact on pop culture.
And if not, well, at least you got a few laughs out of it. Until next time, keep those brains churning and those questions coming. And remember, the next time you find yourself facing a nuclear apocalypse, just remember the words of wisdom from Emmett Fitzhume. Oh, what are we going to do now? We're going to Disneyland. Peace out, motherfuckers.